A future king, a locked door, and sobs so raw they froze palace staff in the hallway. Because whatever Catherine told those children didn't just shake a family, it detonated a royal reality nobody was prepared to face.
And we're a very open family, so we talk about things that bother us and things that trouble us. But you never quite know the knock-on effects it can have.
Behind those doors, history cracked. Servants who had worked in palaces their entire lives swore they had never heard a sound like that from him. Not at Diana's funeral, not during public scandals, not under the crushing weight of duty. But this was different. This was a man breaking in a way that didn't care who heard. And the terrifying part? It started months earlier, in whispers, not screams. Catherine had changed, subtly at first. Cancelled appearances, smiles that never reached her eyes, long silences at dinner where laughter used to live. Staff noticed, William noticed more. He just didn't know what he was looking at. Exhaustion, she said. Overwhelm, the usual royal fog. But her eyes carried secrets, and secrets in a palace grow teeth. Then came the crying. Not public tears, hidden ones. Bathroom floors, guarding corners, phone clutched like a lifeline. William caught glimpses, never the full picture. Every time he got close, she rebuilt the wall. "I'll tell you soon," she whispered one night, voice fragile, asking for trust while clearly drowning in something alone. That word, soon, became a ghost in the house. The children felt it too. George said she'd started asking strange questions on school drives. Not about homework, about identity, about dreams, about whether he ever wished life was normal. Charlotte saw her mother crying in the garden, shoulders shaking behind rose bushes. She didn't interrupt, but she never forgot. Mothers don't cry like that unless the world is ending. And maybe, in Catherine's mind, it was. The day before everything exploded, William overheard the sentence that stopped his heart. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this from them. Not from the public. From them. From the children." That's when dread stopped being abstract. It became a ticking clock. The next morning looked painfully ordinary. Breakfast chatter. Juice poured with trembling hands. Glances at the clock like it was counting down to an execution. Then she gathered them in the sitting room. No staff. No interruptions. Just family. And then came the words no parent ever imagined saying. She started with love. Parents always do when the truth is about to hurt. Then she talked about the years before the children were born, the struggle, the treatments, the desperation to have a family. William relaxed, briefly. He knew that story. He had lived that pain. But Catherine wasn't done. Her voice dropped. Her hands shook. And then she said the thing that made the air leave the room. The clinic had lied. What they thought were standard procedures weren't. There had been alterations, unauthorized ones, genetic interference, experimental work done without consent. Not harm, she insisted through tears, but enhancements. Intelligence markers, health optimization, traits adjusted like settings on a machine. She said experts were involved now, lawyers, investigations, other families affected, powerful ones, influential ones. But none of that mattered to the children sitting on that couch. All they heard was this. Something was done to us before we were born. George stood up first. Anger, shock, betrayal, all fighting for space in a boy who suddenly felt like a science project instead of a son. Charlotte cried. Louis looked confused, sensing disaster without understanding the language of it. William asked the question that really mattered. How long have you known? 3 months. 3 months she carried it alone. 3 months of smiles and school runs and royal duties while holding a secret big enough to split a family in half. That's when he broke. Not politely, not quietly. He walked out and fell apart like a man whose foundation had just been ripped from under him. Because this wasn't just about medicine. This was about trust, about choice, about the idea that their children's very beginnings had been tampered with without their knowledge. Later, in their bedroom, rage turned into grief. Grief turned into something heavier, violation. She told him about the journalist's tip, the documents, the forged forms, the doctor who thought he was improving humanity, wealthy families chosen like test subjects because their kids would have advantages. Advantages. That word tasted poisonous. The more she explained, the worse it sounded. Multiple genes, long-term unknowns, monitoring for life, questions about future children, legal chaos, ethical nightmares. And then came the moment that shattered them again. George had been listening. He stood in the doorway, not crying now, just cold, older than his years in the worst possible way. Are you done talking about us like we're experiments? No training prepares a parent for that sentence. He wanted to know if anything about him was real, if his talents were his or engineered, if he was still him. William grabbed his shoulders and told him the only truth that mattered: love isn't coded in DNA. But the doubt in George's eyes didn't disappear. It just went underground, where fears grow stronger. From that moment on, nothing was private anymore. Palace officials looped in, lawyers activated, medical teams consulted, and somewhere in another residence, a king was told his grandchildren might carry alterations nobody in the monarchy had ever had to consider before. Succession questions whispered in legal offices, ethics debates bubbling in academic circles. And at the center of it all, 3 children who just wanted their old lives back. The world outside the gates would soon explode. But inside, the real battle had already begun. Not for crowns or reputation, but for identity, trust, and the fragile glue holding a family together after the ground beneath them turned to quicksand. And William, the boy who once walked behind his mother's coffin without breaking, had finally met the moment that brought him to his knees. Outside the palace walls, the story spread like wildfire poured on gasoline. Inside, the family was already living in the ashes. The statement went public within days, carefully worded, controlled, legal. It spoke of unauthorized medical procedures and ongoing investigations. It never used the words the children heard in their nightmares: experiment, altered, modified. But the world filled in the blanks anyway. News panels turned their lives into debate topics. Strangers argued about their children's DNA like it was a political issue. Experts who had never met them discussed their futures in calm studio lighting while the actual kids cried in bedrooms with curtains drawn. George felt it first at school. A whisper turned into a nickname turned into a shove. One boy sneered something about lab rat, and George, future king, trained in composure, swung before he even realized he had moved. The bruise on his knuckles told a story no press release ever could. Charlotte went quiet in a different way. No outbursts, no questions, just long hours drawing alone. Paper after paper filled with storm clouds, broken crowns, faceless figures with glowing outlines. Feelings too big for words spilled out in charcoal and color. Louis didn't understand the science, but he understood fear. He started climbing into his parents' bed at night again, small hands gripping Catherine's sleeve like she might disappear if he let go. And Catherine carried that guilt like a weight chained to her chest. She watched each reaction and thought the same unbearable thought: I should have told them sooner. I should have told William sooner. I should have known. William saw it and refused to let her drown alone again. This time, there were no secrets between them. Every fear spoken out loud. Every worst-case scenario dragged into the open where it couldn't grow fangs in the dark. They fought, yes, sharp, painful arguments born from exhaustion and grief, but they didn't shut each other out. Not anymore. Therapists became regular visitors, not the kind who whispered about etiquette or posture. Trauma specialists, child psychologists, genetic counselors who explained complicated science in gentle words, over and over, until panic slowly loosened its grip. One session changed everything. George finally said what had been haunting him: what if nothing I ever achieve is really mine? There it was. The fear that his intelligence, his strengths, his future, all of it would forever have an asterisk next to it. Artificial, assisted, not earned. The therapist didn't dismiss it, didn't sugarcoat it. She told him potential is only a starting line. Plenty of people are born with advantages and do nothing with them. What defines a person is what they choose, how hard they work, how they treat others when nobody is watching. You still have to become who you are, she told him. That idea took root. Charlotte's shift came through art. One afternoon, she brought a drawing to her parents. This one was different. Bright, bold. Their family stood together, capes flying, each with a different glowing symbol on their chest. Maybe we're just different on purpose, she said softly. Like we're supposed to help in special ways. It wasn't science. It wasn't law. But it was hope. And hope is oxygen in a suffocating crisis. Even the palace changed. King Charles' initial fury had burned hot and loud. Lawsuits, accountability, justice demanded in private meetings that shook chandeliers. But beneath the anger was a grandfather staring at a future he didn't recognize. Titles and traditions suddenly felt small compared to 3 children questioning who they were. Camilla took a quieter role. She showed up with board games, sat with Charlotte without forcing conversation. Read to Louis, let George rant without correcting him. Steady, present. No speeches, just warmth. And slowly, painfully, the family began to rebuild not the life they had before, that was gone, but a new one shaped around truth instead of illusion. William turned outward. If this had happened to them, it had happened to others with fewer resources, fewer protections. He threw himself into advocacy for tighter regulations on fertility clinics and genetic research. Not royal ribbon cutting, real policy conversations, uncomfortable meetings, pushing for oversight that should have existed all along. Catherine built quiet networks, private gatherings of affected families, rooms where parents could say, "We're scared too," without cameras, where children could meet others like them and realize they weren't alone, not anomalies, not monsters, just kids caught in adult mistakes. Community formed out of shared shock. The doctor responsible remained defiant in interviews, calling himself a pioneer, a visionary, a man ahead of his time. Every word made William's jaw tighten and Catherine's hand shake, but it also hardened their resolve. Justice wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure no other family sat on a couch one morning and had their reality torn apart. Public opinion shifted, slowly. The gossip cooled into empathy. The shock turned into uncomfortable but necessary conversations about science, ethics, and the line humans should never cross without consent. But inside the palace, the most important changes were quieter. George started reading about bioethics, asking big questions, turning fear into curiosity, curiosity into purpose. Charlotte's artwork moved from pain to power, celebrating uniqueness instead of hiding from it. Louis laughed easily again, the tension in his small shoulders easing. One evening, almost a year later, they all sat together watching something silly on television. No lawyers on speakerphone, no emergency meetings, just a family on a couch. William glanced at Catherine. He remembered the sound of his own sobs that day, the ones that had echoed down palace corridors and shocked people who thought princes didn't break. He remembered believing their world had ended. It hadn't. It had changed. It had cracked open and forced them to confront truths they never wanted. But in the wreckage, something else had grown. Honesty, resilience, a fierce kind of love that had been tested in fire. He reached for her hand. She squeezed back. Not because everything was fixed, not because the future was certain, but because whatever came next, they would never face it behind locked doors and silent suffering again.